I bet that everybody who owns a circular saw at some point tried to make accurate straight cuts using maybe some kind of makeshift guide or even freehanding it for that matter. The problem with that is that it's generally fidgety to set up, it's time consuming and usually not that accurate anyway. But what if you could do straight and accurate cuts every single time within seconds without the need for any clamps, and you could use any circular saw you want? Usually these track saws are made from something like 3/4 inch ply to try and keep them from bending and twisting, but you do end up with something that's much thicker and heavier. This on the other hand is laminate flooring, and this one is about 1/3 the thickness of 3/4 inch plywood. It's very lightweight and extremely durable, which makes it ideal for this application. Usually you buy these in a pack of about 10 or 12, which makes them really cheap and affordable compared to a big sheet of ply. For this track saw, I'm just going to use one panel, and I'm laying it down with this little lip pointing towards me on the side like this. Next thing to do is get your saw, and obviously the very first thing you want to do is just remove the battery. We don't want any nasty accidents while we're doing this. Next up, we want to move this over slightly to the side like this. So what we want to do is not try and line it up with the factory edge all the way along here, but rather just bring it out far enough so that there is still a little bit of a lip left to cut off afterwards, and you'll see why that's important in just a minute. Next up, just measure from this side to that side and just mark halfway through. That's where we're going to make a cut lengthwise, and in this case I have got left about 100 millimeters, which is 4 inches, and that is 2 inches halfway, or 50 millimeters, and that's the point where I need to make a cut lengthwise through this board. If you do not have a table saw to make a cut like this, don't worry about it too much, just do the best you can, and then instead of using the cut edge as the guide, just flip it around and use the outside, which is the factory edge, and that's perfectly straight anyway, so no big deal. To temporarily hold this in place, I'm using super glue, but you can also use CA glue if you want to. This is optional, but it does make it a lot easier to keep in place while you are drilling and screwing it. I'm drilling these holes about 4.5 inches apart, which is roughly 115 millimeters. Unfortunately, the screws I have are a bit long for this application, so I will just use my grinder just to take off that little sharp pointy bit sticking out on the underside. This won't matter much, and you'll see why in just a second. To make this saw track stick to just about any surface, I'm using this non-slip thread tape, which is pretty easy to apply since it already has a sticky backing to it. The alternative to this would be to use double-sided tape and something like a 120 grit sandpaper, and that'll do exactly the same thing. The next step is to cut off the edge of the board we left earlier so that the saw blade will run perfectly parallel to it. This is now the edge you will use to line up your cuts. This track saw is not only great for breaking up stock, it's perfect for making shorter straight cuts without having to use any clamps. And if you want to, you can even make shorter versions for smaller jobs. But if you do want to make long cuts over, say, a full sheet of ply, then I would recommend you watch the next video where we build this one, because this one has got a special edge to it, which kind of gives it an edge. And I'll see you on the next one.